Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks, and welcome to the top 10 albums from Van Morrison. So, if you've been watching our series, you know this is the third video in this sort of Van Morrison series. If you haven't watched them, I suggest you go back and check them out. The first video, just an introduction to Van Morrison. We got into some of the controversial issues associated with Van Morrison. Did a quick overview of them, the first band that he was in that got some attention. And the previous video was number 26 through 11. And we're ranking his studio albums, just his 20th century output. And I kind of, in those videos, I explain why I didn't go beyond the 20th century. And so here we are at the top 10. I think we're going to have one more video after this. I really need to dive into the live albums and compilations, important stuff. But top 10 Van Morrison studio albums here. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the previous video, what we have left here is basically the entire 1968 to 1974 run, which was, rivals anybody's streak. And we've got two, I misspoke in the previous video, we have two 80s albums still left on the table, and one from 1979. And so that's where we are. So at number 10 is one of those 80s albums, and it's 1989's Avalon Sunset. Avalon Sunset. So this is just beautiful. This record is as elegant as the cover art. I mean, it is an elegant, I don't say that much about records, elegant, at least, records in rock and pop genres, but this is elegant. It is elegance. It's a gorgeous record. And I mentioned in the previous video, he had this kind of commercial and popular resurgence in starting in the late 80s, going into early 90s, really kind of this 3-record streak. Also, this was huge, Best of Van Morrison, which I'll talk about in the next video. This was kind of in that period too, which helped with that resurgence. But and it starts with this record. It starts with this record. Yeah, I look at this album really as, well, actually, not really an end to that 80s, but really I think Hymns to the Silence is kind of the cutoff from 1991 of that sort of 80s Van Morrison. But this is the one that really starts that kind of resurgence in the late 80s, early 90s. Because it's really this one, Enlightenment, Hymns to the Silence, those other two I talked about in the previous video. But this is the one that starts it. Because that Best of Van Morrison follows this. And kind of surprising, kind of a commercial hit. There are actually several singles on here that did well. You didn't see that very much with Van Morrison. And this is so out of time, I mean, this is 1989. I mean, this is, Bon Jovi and Def Leppard, right? And then this. And so, but it works. It is a gorgeous record. It really is. He continues to mine, the nostalgia, sort of looking back at his youth and his life and all of that. And I don't know, it's just a beautiful record all the way through. Definitely explores a lot of his spirituality. There's direct references to it's mostly, I think, a Christian faith in this particular one. Although, in the next one, Enlightenment, right? He's going to look at Buddhism, but whenever God shines his light, which is a great single duet with Cliff Richard. And then I think even better is When Will I Ever Learn to Live in God? It's a gorgeous song. And I think there's something else on here where he's directly, I don't know, it really kind of, really kind of infuses this whole era, really, this sort of spiritual exploration. But of course, the big hit off of here was Have I Told You Lately, which, has way more in common with, kind of a, I don't know, Frank Sinatra type ballad than, like I said, Bon Jovi and Def Leppard of the time. But beautiful song, and it was a hit. In fact, Rod Stewart did a cover of it and had a hit with it as well. But I think Van's is better. But Contacting My Angel is gorgeous. Coney Island, another one of those. I kind of talked about this previous video. Another one of those great kind of spoken word things. Orange Field is great. Yeah, I mean, this is just a, yeah, I think one of, but there's one more coming, but one of the top sort of, post 70s Van Morrison records. Just beautiful record. All right. Well, let's break the seal. Let's get into that 68, 74 period. With number 9, I have 1973's Hard Nose the Highway. And so this is the one, like, out of that streak, it's always the one that's sort of, set aside as, well, it's not quite as great as, these amazing, brilliant records, but it's still good. And I kind of agree with that assessment. Although I wouldn't say good, I would say very good. I mean, it's kind of a cool back cover there. I like that. It's kind of very good, actually. I mean, it's only lesser when it's compared to, what was released around it, in his discography. But no, it's fantastic. It's ambitious. The opener, Snow in San Anselmo, right, which is this very interesting orchestral kind of experimental piece, which I think is fantastic. A Warm Love was kind of the single off of here, which was good. Title track, Hard Nose the Highway, great rocker. Um, Wild Children, another sort of orchestral piece, beautiful, beautiful. Great Deception is. I mean, I'm just kind of going through the whole track list. The whole thing's really good. Like I said, it's just a little bit less compared to these other things. All right, number 8. Now, number 8's going to be a hot take. I think a lot of you guys are going to think I have this way too low. I mean, 8's pretty high. I think it's a great, great record. But I do think, even though it is a great record, tad overrated. That would be a great series, wouldn't it? Like, great records that are still kind of overrated. Anyway, but because in my opinion, I think half of this is just brilliant. The other half is good. But a lot of people think the whole thing is brilliant. Okay, talk about this, right? His band in the street choir from 1970. Um, there we are. Yeah, so his band and the street choir. Like, I think half of this is great. And a lot of this sort of minds, yeah, it's, I would say pop, but they, kind of succinct, short songs. Where he's, kind of getting back into more traditional song structures and stuff like that. Um, a lot of it very kind of R&B influenced, but there's a lot of kind of acoustic. You know, how he does sort of combine that sort of, his love of R&B and blues with sort of acoustic folk, and then, throws a little Celtic magic in there. Although not so much Celtic on this one, comes a little bit later. But I mean, the great is great, right? The single Domino is one of his great singles. Crazy Face is awesome. I've been working is is just so funky. I think one of his funkiest songs. I love I've been working. Woman, 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 woman. It's just so awesome. Uh, I'll Be Your Lover Too. I think is stunningly gorgeous, sparse, stark. Yeah, reminds me a little bit of Astral Weeks type stuff. Beautiful. I think it's really, I don't know. Blue Money's good, but you get most of side two, especially. I think it just sort of levels out, and it's good, but I don't think it's like brilliant all the way through like so many people do. Tell me I'm wrong in the comments. All right, so number 7 is something from that streak, that 68, 74 streak, that I think for the longest time was my least favorite. Obviously not anymore. I really was in kind of preparation for this whole Van Morrison series, where I don't know, I kind of finally discovered my love for Tupelo Honey from 1971. You know, I what it's kind of odd. It's kind of weird. you have this record of sort of, domestic, kind of hippie, marital bliss, with Janet Rigsby, or Janet Planet, right, his wife at the time. And a lot of these songs are just sort of these expressions of this sort of rustic, rural, because I think he was living up in Woodstock, right? Or was it? Or he had, and at some point he goes out to California. I forget. I know he's in Woodstock for a little while, and he goes out to California. I forget the timeline, but anyway. Um, but this sort of rustic, rural bliss, that he's expressing here. Yeah, and I say it's odd, because he's Van Morrison, grumpy Van Morrison, that would be this, curmudgeon that we come to love later. But anyway, but it works. It just, I don't know. Recently, I don't know why it just really hit me, and it does work, and it, well, what have I always loved? I mean, I've always loved. It's kind of hard to see the tracks here. Wild Night is a great single. That's awesome. Straight to your heart like a cannonball. I think rolls along great. And then, of course, the title track, Tupelo Honey, is, I've always felt, is one of his most beautiful songs. So those three have always stuck out to me. But the rest of this finally spoke to me recently. And it's interesting how that happens, especially with Van Morrison stuff. Sometimes it takes a long time. But yeah, and there's a nice consistency to this record, too. It is a kind of a beautiful, rustic record. Yeah, like I don't know what, moonshine whiskey. I don't know. I actually, old Woodstock. Actually, the whole thing kind of jumps out at me now. So there you go. All right, number 6. We will break out a little bit from the 68-74 run. And number 6 is where I have Into the Music from 1979. We got the blue tone, or kind of the more sort of brown tone, whichever version of that picture you like. But Into the Music. Into the Music. This, without hesitation, is where I would recommend anyone who's gotten into that classic period, like where to go next. Here, um, side 1 of Into the Music is probably his most joyous side of music on any record, any of his records. I mean, Bright Side of the Road. I don't care how depressed you are. If you can't get happy for a few minutes listening to that that song, I mean, just the joyful spirit of that song. Great harmonica too, which I'm almost positive Van is playing that harmonica on there. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at. I should have checked before. Yeah, I think Van is the only one who's credited with any harmonica on here, so that has to be Van Morrison. That's a great harmonica on there. Really great harmonica playing. And but just joyful. And then Full Force Gale. I've always said, if you can't find a little bit of religion, a little bit of faith, listen to that song. There's something wrong. I mean, it's just again another joyful expression of kind of spirituality. Stepping Out Queen is that keeps the momentum going. Troubadours slows it down a little bit, but it's still great. Rolling Hills is kind of a nice little sort of Celtic folk deal, and then You Make Me Feel So Free. Kind of closes the side 1 with a little bit of kind of little funky stuff there. And then, what's great is in side 2, he slows it down and it spreads it out. Get some longer songs on side 2. So side 1 and side 2 really do kind of have their real distinct qualities there. It's all in the game. What they're writing about is, he would take that live and expand that, for decades. But I probably the highlight of the whole record, And the Healing Has Begun. Another one of those kind of 8-9 minute, just really it's a 8 or 9 minute seduction, is what he's doing. And I love how, it's beautifully sung. He gets real passionate, but I love that little breakdown kind of, in the second half of the song where he kind of brings it way down and gets into, again, more talking than singing, which I always just really enjoy when Van does that. But yeah, it's just kind of one long seduction, but it's seductive. It is a great song, and he just lets the spirit, those yelps, when he really just lets the spirit take him. I mean, this is I mean, I don't know. It obviously stands up to that 68, 78 run. All right. So, number five. Number five is probably a hot take. Because if you've been really paying attention, there is one 1980s record left. And here's where I have it. I mean, this is high. I acknowledge this is high. But this record just has always spoken to me. This record, I think, is gorgeous. It's consistent. And it's got some Mark Knopfler on there, which always elevates stuff for me. But yeah, I'm talking about Beautiful Vision from 1982. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Like, I have it ranked this high, but I wouldn't recommend going to it early. I mean, check out 68 to 74, check out Into the Music, and then maybe start exploring stuff like this in the 80s. Well, there's a couple of live albums I'm going to talk about in the next episode that you gotta have. But yeah, so this is not where I would start somebody out, but man, you might end up here like I have. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, if I were just ranking stuff like solely on just what I love and like no other considerations, I mean, this might even be higher. I don't know. I love it. It's that Celtic soul. Very little kind of R and there's a little bit, but it's sort of R&B and maybe a little jazzy stuff in there, but really leads into that sort of Celtic stuff. But but it's not like kind of classic, folk or anything like that. It's its own thing, but it's got a fantastic consistency to it. Um, still sort of exploring spirituality, definitely. Northern music, solid ground. She Gives Me Religion, sort of combining some of that faith with, earthly love, right? Um, yeah, Beautiful Vision, right? Which again can be sort of taken both as, romantic love, but also spiritual love, kind of one of those type of songs. Um, the two songs that people probably know the most off of here, I think, are fantastic. Cleaning Windows, which I think is every bit as effective as sort of this working class, song as anything Bruce Springsteen ever did. Um, but very autobiographical. I was reading about that song. That was one of his first jobs he had, was as a window cleaner, and he said this in an interview that that was one of his kind of happiest times in his life. He would go to work, kind of enjoyed the work. He'd come home, listen to records. He was sort of educating himself on music and reading a lot of kind of Jack Kerouac and philosophers and stuff, and just educating himself. And he in that interview he talked about, it was got some of the probably the most carefree point in his life. Anyway, the song captures all of that. It is great, and on top of that, it's got a great groove to it, a great music to it. That's a song that he continues to play live. I mean, he has gone to it ever since, as he should. It's a great song. Dweller on the Threshold is just magical for me. I love the lyrics, but the music, that rolling arpeggio on that guitar is just it just gets me every time. I love that song. Love that song. Um, Really, the second side especially, I think flows nicely. Van Lowe's Stairway. Just read the lyrics to that. Van Lowe's Stairway is such a great song lyrically. It's interesting. I mean, it just kind of shows you how well he writes. That song he wrote about his girlfriend at the time, and she lived somewhere. Well, of course she lived somewhere, but was Sweden or I don't remember. She lived somewhere in Scandinavia, I think. But and I mean, the song is literally about the stairway up to her apartment. And he turns that into this transcendently, beautiful song. Aryan Mist, I think, rolls along gorgeous, and he's got the closer, Scandinavia, which is instrumental. He's beautiful. I talked about that in the last video. I love his instrumentals. It's a gorgeous, and he actually plays piano on that one. The man plays a lot of instruments. A lot of people don't realize that, but Scandinavia, it's just it's a gorgeous closer. I don't know. This record is special to me. It's always hit me. And so, yeah, that's why I have it kind of smack in the middle of these classic era Van Morrison records. All right. So, 4 and 3 uh, kind of are related. Well, it's interesting because 3 opens the 68 run and 4 closes the 68 run. So I just gave them both away, right? But I could talk a little bit about them together and then a little bit separately. But so at 4 I have Veedon Fleece from 1974, and at 3 I have, of course, Astral Weeks from 1968. Uh, very hold them both up, yeah. So, like I said, related. I mean, nothing in popular music sounds like this. One of the closest things that does is this. So they are kind of related, I think, spiritually. Well, let's let's hit Vita and Fleece first. That's it. I have that at number 4. It similar in Astral Weeks and very kind of stream of consciousness. I believe he had just gotten divorced, right, and he had just sort of moved with his new girlfriend, like temporarily, but he ended up staying for a while back to Ireland and got a lot of inspiration there. I believe that's kind of the backing story, but just very mystical, kind of Celtic mystical stuff. Very stream of consciousness. There's a quote from Van Morrison I read where he's talking about this record, and I'll read it. He says, "I have no clue what most of that album is about. I think I was picking these songs out of the air. Sounds like it. Yeah, and these are songs that just sort of came from somewhere else, the muse or God or whatever you want to believe, and just yeah, the very kind of Celtic folk. Um, yeah, I mean, just very delicate too, but beautiful, not fragile. But I don't know what the hell I'm trying to say, but yeah, like Van, right? It just sort of comes to you. Lyndon Arden stole the highlights. Beautiful stuff, getting that falsetto. Um, but Bulbs is kind of as close as you get to a kind of a folk rocker here, right? You don't pull no punches, but you don't push the river. I think is the best example. One of those kind of longer, I don't know, it's like 10 minutes or so, but stream of consciousness things. Comfort You is great. This whole thing. Who is that masked man? Um, well, actually, Who Was That Masked Man and Lyndon Arden Stole the Highlights uh, are semi-autobiographical. I was reading, because they are about someone who goes to San Francisco, an Irishman who goes to San Francisco. Well, there you go. But then gets into more of a little bit more fiction, because I think it's Who Was That Masked Man? He turns to crime. As far as I know, Van Morrison wasn't robbing banks or whatever in San Francisco. But anyway, Streets of Arklow. I almost forgot about that. Streets of Arklow is that is great. That's again one of those sort of nostalgic songs, but it's not real obvious. I mean, it's kind of couched in very mysterious lyrics and all that. Yeah, just like I said, nothing like this. There is nothing like this, but this is about the closest there is. So let's talk about this. Okay, Astral Weeks at number 3, 1968. There is nothing like this. I mean, nothing, nothing, nothing. Free folk, jazz improvisation. I don't know what song cycle. What I mean, especially what came before this was his debut, right? Blowing Your Mind, which Van was so angry about. He was trying to kind of get out from that contract and all that. But so during that dispute with Bang Records and Burt Burns' widow, who still kind of owned his contract at the time, he couldn't really record very much or perform too many places. So he was performing in like small, like little clubs, coffee houses, like in Boston on the East Coast a little bit. And he was working with a small trio. So it was him on guitar, guy on a stand-up bass, and then someone was playing some woodwinds, some flute, kind of very delicate stuff. And those clubs and coffee houses were sort of where he really developed a lot of this material. And well, I mean, I don't know what I can say about Astral Weeks that hasn't been said a million times, and probably better than I can say it. But yeah, acoustic, free folk, very improvisational. In fact, I was reading, there weren't any lead sheets for the musicians, and the musicians were very confused by this strange Irishman who walked in and just wanted to just kind of improvise. Uh, Van, of course, claims his songs are mostly fictional, but people, of course, try to find a lot of autobiographical stuff in there. He said of Madame George, I think it was Madame George, right? Where, there's like 10, 12 people in there and you can pick them out or find them if you tried. I haven't really tried, um, but yeah, it's acoustic. Yeah, and the instrumentation, upright bass, flute, Van Morrison's very loose acoustic guitar vibes, drums, some strings, not rock and roll, at all. Um, Connie Kay, the drummer from Modern Jazz Quartet, one of my favorite jazz groups, actually, plays drums on here. So yeah, it's very unique, really is. Um, I mean, I go through the songs, but I mean, Astral Weeks, Cypress Avenue, those are some favorites. My very favorite song on here, though, isn't talked about as much as it's the final one, Slim Slow Slider. For whatever reason, that song to me is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard in popular music. It's probably in my top 20 favorite songs of all time. It's so sparse. I've read different interpretations of it. Some say it's a girlfriend who had a heroin issue, but yeah, I've heard other interpretations. Whatever it is, because the lyrics on this album are so they're in some places impenetrable, I guess, unless you really really study it. But I don't really care. I mean, it is a gorgeous song. Yeah, I know you're dying, baby. When it hits that, and then there's one other point. That note on the upright bass, where it's just, yeah, it's hard to sing it, but I don't know. That's just what this gives me goosebumps. I mean, anyway, Astral Weeks. Yeah, it's impossible to try and describe in words what this sounds like. You just got to go listen to it, and it is a wholly unique, record in popular music. There. At number two, I have what All Music. I forget the reviewer, but on All Music on the review here, they say it is the yin to Astral Week's yang, which I kind of like, and I kind of see what the point was. And I have 1970s Moondance, right? Maybe his most accessible record out of this whole period, this whole era. I don't know. And it followed Astral Weeks, and it mines some of the same topics, but where I agree with the All Music review is he this time he couches them in very traditional song structures. There's verses, there's choruses, there's they actually sound like organized, structured songs versus the free folk of Astral Weeks, and probably his most accessible, catchy batch of songs. I mean, just brilliant. Side one of this, right? And It Stoned Me. One of his earliest songs are really kind of looking back, nostalgically at his youth. Moondance, which to me is just one of the greatest songs in sort of the rock side of things, but that really, you know, brings in jazz elements. I mean, that sax solo in there is great. Crazy Love is awesome. Caravan is amazing. Although even more amazing on I don't know. Why I should have started this out by saying Happy Last Waltz Day, right? And Van Morrison's performance of Caravan at the Last Waltz is one of the Van Morrison highlights. One of the definitely I think the highlight of that show. But anyway, it's on here. Of course, Into the Mystic. I mean, that's all side one. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, side two is great too. But I don't know. If someone's just starting out with Van Morrison, probably send them here. This is his most accessible batch of songs, I think, all together on one record. But that doesn't take away the depth of the songs at all. And yeah, it's just, Astral weeks of this coming, back to back. Just wow. But all right. So where does that leave us? Well, you've been counting, you know what's left. 1972, St. Dominic's preview. I think, I don't know, I just said maybe send a beginner to Astral Weeks, but I don't know. If you wanted to send somebody to a record to like, here's what Van Morrison's all about, at least kind of in that classic period. Because this one kind of has it all, right? It's got those kind of tight, sort of poppy R&B infused songs like, Jackie Wilson said, which is the horns in that song, just about as joyous as you can get. It's got kind of his, bluesy stuff like I Will Be There, kind of bluesy, jazzy, jazz blues, whatever you want to call it, right? Redwood Trees, also kind of a real tight, a great song here. Gypsy's good. Then St. Dominic's Preview, the title track is kind of one of those sort of, it's not one of those real tight, short songs, about 6 minutes, I think, right? But it's not one of his super long ones either. So it's sort of just in the middle, just right. Lyrically, one of his most interesting songs, really kind of referencing a lot of stuff from his past and also, from San Francisco too. Yeah. And then, of course, you've got two of his like really expansive, exploratory, where he really gets into that soul, but Van Morrison soul, right? Almost Independence Day and Listen to the Lion. Those two songs. Just, again, kind of more the improvisation, just really sort of letting the music take him, sometimes even beyond words, where it's just making sounds. I don't know. It's all here, right? Like all of those different aspects of Van Morrison can all be found on one record during his peak period, and they're all, great songs. I mean, this, to me, I think this is his best single record. We're bringing all those elements together. So therefore, I have it at number one, and it's also my favorite Van Morrison record too. So it's all there. Well, all right, guys. What do you think? Unload in the comments. Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? What would your top 10 be? What's your favorite? Let's just talk top 10 Van Morrison. And I really enjoyed the comments in the previous video. Some great discussion. And so let's just kind of let's keep that going. Kind of reminded me. I forgive me, I forget the name of the commenter, but made a real good point. About how Van Morrison, his music is so personal, like as a listener. So more so than a lot of other artists. It's a very personal thing on which Van Morrison records you really like and which ones hit you, which I guess is a great description of, what was it, my number 5, right? Beautiful Vision. Is that really his 5th greatest record? Probably not, but for me, really hits home and strikes a chord with me. So there you go. Please promise me that you will watch the next video. I know it sounds kind of like a cleanup video. We have to talk about live albums and compilations, but there are essential. Like, we have to talk about this, and we have to talk about this, and we have to talk about this, and others. Like, we have to talk about some of these live albums, because if I was including live albums in this list, I mean, there are 2 of them there that would be in the top 10. I mean, there are essential live Van Morrison records. So we're going to talk about that in the next episode. So tune in for that, and we'll see you next time.